a quiet, unassuming village, there lived an elderly blacksmith named Raito. His name was well known among warriors and travelers who passed through, for he had spent decades perfecting the art of sword making. Each weapon that emerged from his forge was finely crafted, sharp, and durable. Yet, despite his skill, Raito had never created a sword that he could truly call perfect. No matter how many blades he forged, he always felt that he was still chasing an unattainable masterpiece, one that would withstand any battle and never break. One fateful day, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows over the village, a legendary knight arrived. Clad in gleaming armor, he rode into town with an air of authority, his presence demanding attention. The villagers gathered around as he approached Raito's forge, his voice firm yet composed. "I have traveled across many lands in search of the finest swordsmith," the knight declared. "They say you are skilled, but skill alone is not enough. I need a sword that will never break, a blade that can withstand the fiercest battles without failing." A hush fell over the crowd as they turned to Raito, waiting for his response. But before he could speak, the knight continued, his tone carrying both challenge and expectation. "Only if you can forge such a weapon will I recognize you as a true master of your craft." Murmurs rippled through the gathering. Some villagers scoffed, whispering among themselves. "An unbreakable sword? Impossible. The old man has skill, but he's wasting his time trying to achieve the impossible. He should know when to accept his limits." Doubt and skepticism filled the air, but Raito remained silent. He did not argue, nor did he defend himself. Instead, he turned back toward his forge, his weathered hands tightening around the hammer that had shaped countless blades before. For him, this was not just a challenge. It was the opportunity he had spent his entire life waiting for. With unwavering determination, Raito set to work, forging the sword that would prove his lifelong mastery. He selected the finest steel, carefully refining and tempering it under the relentless heat of his forge. Sparks danced in the dim workshop as his hammer struck the glowing metal, each impact carrying the weight of his experience and ambition. After days of labor, the first sword was complete. Its polished blade gleamed under the sunlight, exuding strength and precision. With confidence, Raito lifted it for the first test, a single, decisive strike against a solid iron block. Crack. The sword shattered instantly. A stunned silence filled the air before it was quickly replaced by laughter and ridicule. "He's too old, his skills are fading," someone jeered. "So much for the great blacksmith, he can't even make a sword that survives one strike." But Raito did not flinch. He simply gathered the broken shards and began again. For his second attempt, he sought to refine the blade further. He mixed precious metals into the steel, believing that their properties would enhance the sword's durability. He worked tirelessly, perfecting the balance of the alloy, molding and shaping it with precision. This time, the sword shone with a golden sheen, its intricate patterns mesmerizing under the firelight. But when he tested it, the blade bent under pressure, warping like soft clay. Laughter erupted once more. "Is he making a sword or a piece of jewelry?" sneered a fellow blacksmith. "Maybe he should switch to crafting ornaments instead." Still, Raito did not respond. Instead, he returned to his forge, his mind racing through new possibilities. For his third attempt, he employed a special folding technique, layering the metal dozens of times to strengthen its core. The process took weeks, pushing his endurance to its limits. When he finally tested it in a mock battle, the blade held strong at first, but after a few heavy clashes, it cracked, unable to withstand prolonged impact. "That's 3 failures in a row, he should just give up," some villagers whispered. "This is pointless, he's chasing a fantasy." Despite their words, Raito's resolve did not waver. He was not concerned with their opinions. He knew that true mastery was forged in failure. As the weeks passed, even those closest to him began to worry. "You've spent your whole life making swords, but is this really worth it?" his apprentice asked hesitantly. "You're exhausting yourself, and for what? No one has ever made an unbreakable sword." Younger blacksmiths in the village gained more recognition, producing swords that were already in high demand among mercenaries and soldiers. Some of them even started mocking Raito, claiming he was wasting his time on a foolish dream. The village elders, once proud of his contributions, now frowned upon his relentless pursuit. "You should focus on making swords for the warriors in need," they advised. "Your obsession is making you neglect your duties to the village." The weight of their words pressed down on him, but Raito remained steadfast. He knew that if he yielded now, he would never uncover the true limits of his craft. Raito did not argue. He did not attempt to justify his failures or explain his unwavering persistence. Instead, he did what he had always done. He continued working. One evening, while studying ancient forging techniques, he stumbled upon an old legend. It spoke of a mythical metal known as heavenly fire ore, found only deep within the heart of an active volcano. This ore was said to withstand even the most extreme conditions, its strength unmatched by any metal known to man. It was exactly what he had been searching for. The journey was perilous. The volcano lay far beyond the village, across treacherous landscapes filled with steep cliffs, raging rivers, and unpredictable storms. When Raito announced his departure, the villagers shook their heads in disbelief. "He's gone mad. He's risking his life for a fairy tale. Even if he finds it, he's too old to survive such a journey." But none of their words could deter him. Through harsh storms, scorching heat, and exhausting terrain, Raito pressed on, driven by an unshakable purpose. Days turned into weeks, his body battered but his spirit unyielding. At last, standing before the roaring mouth of the volcano, he found veins of glowing crimson ore buried deep within the volcanic rock. With every ounce of strength he had left, he extracted what he needed and began his long journey home. When he finally returned, his hands were burned, his body weakened, but his determination stronger than ever. Now with the heavenly fire ore in his grasp, it was time for Back in his workshop, Raito wasted no time. With the heavenly fire ore in his possession, he set to work, pouring all of his experience, knowledge, and soul into what would be his greatest creation. The forge burned hotter than ever before, its flames reflecting in his determined eyes. Day and night, he labored relentlessly, hammering, folding, and tempering the metal with an unyielding focus. The heat blistered his skin, and his hands bled, but not once did he falter. At first, the villagers continued to mock him, dismissing his efforts as another futile attempt. "He's at it again. Does he never learn? Even if he found some rare metal, he'll just fail like before." But as the days stretched into weeks, something changed. Raito never stopped. His dedication was absolute. He never complained, never rested, never wavered. Slowly, those who had once ridiculed him began to watch in silence. Some, out of sheer curiosity, came to observe the old blacksmith at work. They saw his hands, raw and burnt, gripping the hammer with unwavering strength. They saw the fierce glow of the molten blade reflecting in his sweat-covered face. They saw a man who refused to surrender. Mockery turned into whispers. Whispers turned into admiration. And by the time the sword was nearly complete, the entire village had gathered around his forge, holding their breath in anticipation. After months of relentless labor, the sword was finally complete. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, a blade that shimmered with an ethereal glow, its edges so finely honed that it seemed to cut through the very air. The time had come for the final test. In the center of the village stood a massive boulder, a stone so dense that no weapon had ever managed to even scratch its surface. Raito carried the sword toward it, his grip firm but steady. The villagers held their breath. With a single fluid motion, Raito swung the sword downward. "Changing." For a moment, there was silence. Then a deep rumble. Before their eyes, the boulder split cleanly in half, the two pieces falling apart as if sliced by an invisible force. The blade in Raito's hands remained flawless, its edge untouched. The entire village erupted into gasps and exclamations of shock. Unbelievable. Imd actually did it. An unbreakable sword, it's real. And then, from the back of the crowd, a familiar voice rang out. The legendary knight had returned. He stepped forward, eyes locked onto the blade, his voice filled with genuine astonishment. This is the strongest sword I have ever seen. The same villagers who had once laughed at Raito now stood in awe, their disbelief shattered like the boulder before them. The very people who had once mocked and doubted Raito now stood in admiration and respect. The villagers who had sneered at his failures spoke of him with pride and reverence. We should have believed in him all along. His perseverance is greater than any sword he could forge. Even the younger blacksmiths, those who had surpassed him in fame, now sought to learn from him. They came to his forge eager to understand his techniques, but more than that, they wanted to learn the unyielding spirit that had carried him through every hardship. Raito, however, held no grudges. He welcomed them openly, teaching them with the same patience and wisdom that had guided him through his journey. He did not revel in their apologies, nor did he remind them of their past doubts. He simply shared his knowledge, knowing that true mastery was meant to be passed down. As the years went by, Raito's forge became a place of learning and inspiration. His name, once the subject of ridicule, became a legend in itself. Yet, when asked why he had endured so much, why he had never fought back against those who mocked him, he simply smiled. "I never sought to prove anything to others," he said. "I forged that sword because I believed in it. Not to silence doubters, not to gain recognition, just because I never wanted to abandon my dream." And then, with a knowing glint in his eyes, he left behind his final lesson. You don't need to argue with those who doubt you. Just persist and let success speak for itself.